Some parents don't just call 911 when a predator messes with their kid. They take it a lot further and deliver the most brutal justice. Here are 10 cases of predators who got destroyed by parents. Raymond Frolander.
18-year-old Raymond Frolander standing before a judge charged with sexual battery. His face swollen and bruised. Daytona Beach police say Frolander was beaten by the father of the victim.
July 18, 2014, in Daytona Beach, Florida, a father's world was shattered in the most unimaginable way when he caught a predator violating his son. This dad was going to make sure the predator never laid hands on another child ever again. What happened next was truly shocking. It was late when the father returned home from a quick trip to the store. He walked through the door expecting the ordinary, but what he found was a nightmare. His 11-year-old son, his baby, was being abused by someone they had trusted, an 18-year-old family friend named Raymond Frolander. The sight was enough to make any parent's blood boil.
I attacked him viciously, and I didn't stop. The only time I paused was to go to the kitchen and retrieve a butcher knife because I was going to kill him.
Without hesitation, he lunged at Frolander. His fist flew, fueled by a rage that only a parent who sees their child in danger could understand. He didn't stop until Frolander was unconscious, lying motionless on the floor. The predator, who had dared to harm his son, was no match for the fury of this dad. When the fight was over, the father calmly picked up the phone and called 911. He told the dispatcher that the predator was already knocked out cold. This was a dad that was proud of what he did and did not care what anyone thought about it. When the police arrived, they found Frolander battered and bleeding, his face swollen from the father's relentless assault. But the officers didn't see a criminal in the father, they saw a hero.
When Daytona Beach police showed up, they found Frolander unconscious. He was taken to the hospital, then to jail.
Daytona Beach Police Chief Mike Chitwood later said, "Dad was acting like a dad. I don't see anything we could charge the dad with." And just like that, the father walked away, not with handcuffs, but with the respect of a community that understood his actions came from a place of pure, unflinching love. Frolander, on the other hand, faced the full weight of the law. He was arrested and charged with battery on a child under 12. In the end, he pleaded no contest and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Justice was served, but not without a cost. The scars left on the family, emotional, psychological, and physical, would take years to heal if they ever did. Sean Foster.
I was just going to put my shotgun right here and just pull the trigger.
On April 15, 2024, Brandon Moore, a father tormented by the abuse of his daughter at the hands of his so-called best friend, was fed up with the slow pace of police intervention. Despite having reported the disturbing behavior to law enforcement, the delay in decisive action forced Moore to work out an elaborate plan to expose the perpetrator. With his wife's support, he carefully planned a sting operation designed to capture undeniable evidence of the abuse. His strategy involved covert surveillance, careful documentation, and a reliance on technology to record the events. It was like a sting operation, but this time he relied on his family to get the molester and not the police. To resist the temptation of killing the predator, Brandon hid his guns and decided to deal with him with his fists.
And my dad beat you up, so it works out.
In 2014, Sean Foster, a family friend, exploited the trust of the Moore family to abuse their 14-year-old daughter, Madeline, over several years. The abuse came to light when Madeline, after years of silence, confided in her mother during a routine doctor's visit. This was a deep betrayal to Brandon and his family, who trusted Sean. But Sean had messed with the wrong dad. Brandon Moore, a former Marine, was not the kind of man that would sit by and wait for the police to do something when his daughter's life was in danger. Using his daughter's phone, Brandon lured Foster to their home under the guise of meeting Madeline. What Foster didn't know was that Brandon was waiting, ready to confront him. The ensuing confrontation was explosive. Brandon recorded the encounter as he physically subdued Foster, demanding answers and giving him a good beating he would not forget for the rest of his life. Sean must have been glad when the police showed up to take him away from the angry father. It was sweet justice for Madeline. Foster was eventually sentenced to 55 years in prison for his crimes, a verdict that brought a measure of closure to the Moore family. Brandon's actions, while risky and emotionally charged, played a significant role in securing justice for Madeline.
I went and put the shotgun and the knife in the garage, and I thought, I'm just going to deal with him with my hands.
His bravery and determination not only exposed Foster's guilt, but also shows the devastating impact of child abuse and the lengths to which a parent will go to protect their child. The next case is even more dramatic, and the damage the predator got is a lot more devastating. Jeremy Dwayne Gibson.
When this 33-year-old man walked into this Del City, Oklahoma backyard, what he got wasn't what he was expecting.
On June 29, 2017, a father in Del City, Oklahoma would carry out a sting operation against a predator that was targeting his daughter. The video recorded showed how everything went down, but it was nothing short of impressive. The father had always been vigilant about his 15-year-old daughter's safety. Like many parents, he worried about the dangers of the online world, so he installed a monitoring app called Family Time on her phone, not to invade her privacy, but to keep her safe. Little did he know, that decision would soon save her from a predator's grasp. One day, while checking the app, he stumbled upon something that made his blood run cold. His daughter had been exchanging messages with a 33-year-old man named Jeremy Dwayne Gibson, a man more than twice her age. The conversations were explicit, inappropriate, and horrifying. What made it worse? Gibson wasn't a stranger. He was someone the family knew. The father's instincts kicked in immediately. He contacted the police, hoping they would step in and stop this predator, but he was told there was nothing they could do unless the predator had carried out his evil intent. The law required concrete evidence of wrongdoing, and until Gibson made a move, his hands were tied. For most parents, this would have been the end of the road, but not for this dad. He refused to sit back and wait for something terrible to happen. He decided to take matters into his own hands. The Oklahoma dad assumed his daughter's identity online and continued the conversation with Gibson. Playing the role perfectly, he lured Gibson into setting up a meeting at their family home. The predator took the bait, unaware that he was walking into a trap. On the night of the meeting, the tension was high. The father, along with his wife and 3 other family members, prepared for the confrontation. They set up a tent in the backyard, the agreed meeting spot, and waited. When Gibson arrived, he thought he was about to meet a vulnerable teenage girl. Instead, he was met by the girl's stepmother, who stood there calm and collected as the father and his family emerged from the shadows. In a swift and decisive move, the father and his family overpowered Gibson. They restrained him with zip ties, holding him until the police arrived. It was a moment of raw justice. Deshaun Brown. In June 2022, a courtroom in Cincinnati became the stage for a father's raw rage when he pounced on the man that had brought grief to his family. The scene was chaotic and emotional altogether. Antonio Hughes was a man whose life had been shattered by unimaginable loss. As he sat just feet away from the man accused of destroying his world, he saw an opportunity to carry out some revenge. Deshaun Brown, the man charged with the murder of Hughes' 3-year-old son Nilo and the boy's mother, Natisha Lattimore, sat calmly, seemingly untouched by the weight of his alleged crimes. But things were about to change from calm to violent very quickly. The story began in December 2020 when Natisha Lattimore was found brutally stabbed to death. The horror didn't end there. Authorities claimed that Brown, her boyfriend at the time, had not only taken her life, but had also committed an act so unspeakable it defied comprehension. He allegedly threw 3-year-old Nilo, still alive, into the icy waters of the Ohio River. The little boy's body was never found, leaving his family and the community haunted by the absence of closure. For Antonio Hughes, the pain was unbearable. As the legal proceedings dragged on, Hughes sat through hearing after hearing, each one reopening the wound of his loss. But on June 23, 2022, something inside him snapped. During a routine procedural hearing, as lawyers argued over technicalities, Hughes found himself seated directly behind Brown. The man accused of destroying his family was right there, within arm's reach. The courtroom, with its rules and decorum, suddenly felt like a cage, and at that moment, Hughes broke free. With a roar of anguish and fury, Hughes lunged at Brown. His fists flew, each strike a desperate attempt to make the man feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused. The courtroom erupted into chaos as officers rushed to restrain Hughes, but not before he had delivered a message using his fists. Brown's defense team would argue about mental competency, trying to soften the blow of the charges against him. But the charges were grave: aggravated murder, tampering with evidence, and gross abuse of a corpse. If convicted, Brown could face the death penalty, a punishment that seemed almost too lenient for the horrors he was accused of committing. Yet, in that courtroom, Antonio Hughes had already delivered his own verdict. His actions, though outside the bounds of the law, spoke to something deeper. He was fighting for Nilo, for Natisha, for the life that had been stolen from them. And in that moment, he became more than a grieving father. He became a hero, a man who refused to let evil go unchallenged. Mark Anthony Stanley.
Deputies responded and say they found Stanley with several facial injuries, and the father had a handgun. Stanley's mugshot shows those injuries. He is facing several charges.
On December 29, 2019, a quiet morning in Spotsylvania County, Virginia, turned into a scene of chaos and justice when a father discovered the unthinkable. Mark Anthony Stanley, a 60-year-old man from Burlington, North Carolina, was visiting family for the holidays. What began as a festive gathering quickly descended into horror when the father of two small children, aged 2 and 3, walked into their bedroom to check on them. What he found would ignite a father's fury that would make him take drastic action. The father opened the door to find Stanley in the room, his pants off, allegedly molesting the children. The sight was enough to shatter any parent's heart, but for this father, it was a call to action. He confronted Stanley, demanding to know what he was doing. Instead of answering, Stanley pushed the father out of the room and locked the door. But this father was not about to let a predator hide behind a locked door. He forced his way back in and unleashed a torrent of rage, beating Stanley until the man was severely injured. The scene was chaotic when deputies arrived. They found Stanley with severe facial injuries and the father, armed with a handgun, standing over him. The father, though enraged, complied when deputies asked him to drop the weapon. Investigators later confirmed that Stanley had been molesting the children and the father's actions were driven by a need to protect his kids. Stanley was rushed to the hospital for his injuries and later charged with 2 counts of indecent liberties with a child and 1 count of domestic assault. The children were also taken to the hospital for evaluation, their innocence violated, but they could gain strength knowing their father fought for them. Remarkably, the father faced no charges for his actions. Authorities understood that he was acting out of desperate need to defend his children, a sentiment echoed by many in the community. Jesus Mora Flores.
In the course of him trying to rescue his daughter, he struck the individual several times, and the individual ended up dying.
On June 9, 2012, a quiet afternoon on a remote Texas ranch turned into a scene of unimaginable horror and a father's desperate fight for justice. A 23-year-old father, whose name remains undisclosed to protect his daughter's identity, was preparing food for a family gathering when he was alerted that his 5-year-old daughter had been taken to a secluded area by Jesus Mora Flores, a 47-year-old ranch hand hired to help with horses. What followed was a father's worst nightmare and his unyielding response to protect his child. The father heard his daughter's screams and rushed to find Flores on top of her, his pants and underwear pulled down. In a fit of rage and desperation, the father pulled Flores off his child and began beating him with his fist, delivering several blows to the man's head and neck. The attack left Flores unconscious, and despite the father's frantic efforts to save him, even calling 911 and pleading for help, Flores was pronounced dead at the scene. The 911 call, released to the public, captures the father's raw emotion with him screaming and pleading that the responders should arrive quickly because the guy was going to die on him. He said he did not know what to do. His voice was breaking with panic and grief when he made the call. The call reveals a man torn between his instinct to protect his child and his humanity, as he even offers to drive Flores to the hospital himself. Forensic evidence and witness accounts corroborated the father's story, confirming that his daughter had been sexually assaulted. The Lavaca County Sheriff's Office, along with Texas Rangers, conducted a thorough investigation, and the case was labeled a homicide. However, the grand jury ultimately declined to indict the father, ruling that his use of deadly force was justified under Texas law to stop an assault. The community rallied around the father, with neighbors and friends defending his actions. Michael Veit, a neighbor, stated, "Justice was served. He said what happened there was unfortunate because a man lost his life, but in an instance like that, anyone would have reacted that way." Even the Lavaca County Sheriff, Micah Harmon, expressed sympathy, calling the case traumatizing for the family and emphasizing that the father was simply protecting his daughter. Thomas Williams. On July 17, 2015, Kenneth Faulkner, a father from Maury County, Tennessee, made headlines for taking justice into his own hands after the legal system failed to protect his daughters. Faulkner's 2 young girls, aged 4 and 7, had been sexually solicited by Thomas Williams, a man connected to the family through marriage. Despite Faulkner's efforts to report the crime, Williams received a shockingly lenient sentence of only 3 years of supervised probation with no jail time. This outcome left Faulkner feeling betrayed and desperate for accountability. Faulkner's frustration reached a breaking point when he encountered Williams on the street. Williams, seemingly unrepentant, winked and smiled at Faulkner, further fueling his anger. Faulkner later confronted Williams at his homes, where the encounter turned violent. Faulkner admitted to attacking Williams, punching him repeatedly and throwing him down the stairs of his trailer. Williams was hospitalized but sustained no life-threatening injuries. Meanwhile, Faulkner was arrested and charged with aggravated assault, facing a $6,000 bond, triple the amount Williams had posted for his own charges. Faulkner openly stated that he did it for his daughters, and when he was asked if he was willing to go to jail for his actions, he replied that he would gladly go to jail for them too. Paramjit Singh's extreme revenge. On April 14, 2014, in the small village of Kotli Ablu, Punjab, India, Paramjit Singh carried out an act of vengeance that would ignite a national debate about justice, retribution, and the limits of parental protection. Singh's infant daughter had been sexually assaulted by Parminder Singh, a 17-year-old neighbor. Despite the gravity of the crime, the legal system's response left Singh feeling betrayed and powerless. Determined to ensure his daughter's molesters faced consequences, Singh took justice into his own hands in a matter that was as brutal as it was shocking. The incident began when Singh discovered Parminder assaulting his 7-month-old daughter. Authorities arrested Parminder, but the court proceedings offered little solace to Singh. Frustrated by what he perceived as a lack of adequate punishment, Singh devised a plan to exact his own form of justice. After a court hearing, he approached Parminder under the guise of offering a compromise. He lured the teenager onto his motorcycle, claiming they would finalize the agreement. Along the way, Singh drugged Parminder's drink, rendering him unconscious. He then took the boy to Jumba village, where he tied him to a tree and, using a machete, severed both of Parminder's hands. The case sparked widespread debate in India and beyond. On one hand, Singh's actions were condemned as vigilante justice, a dangerous precedent that undermined the rule of law. Critics argued that such acts of retribution could lead to a cycle of violence and chaos. On the other hand, many sympathized with Singh, viewing his actions as a desperate response to a system that often fails victims of sexual violence. The leniency shown to Parminder in the initial court proceedings showed the broader issue of inadequate legal protections for victims, particularly children. Jeff Doucet. In 1984, a shocking moment was captured on live television. A father, fueled by grief and rage, took justice into his own hands. His name was Gary Ploche, and his story remains one of the most debated acts of vigilante justice in American history. Some saw him as a criminal, but to many, he was a hero who avenged his son. Gary Ploche was an ordinary man from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He worked as an equipment operator and was known as a loving father to his children. Life was peaceful until one tragic event shattered his world. His 11-year-old son, Jody Ploche, was kidnapped by Jeff Doucet, who was Jody's karate instructor. Doucet was someone the Ploche family had trusted. He had been teaching Jody karate for some time, and no one suspected anything unusual. But Doucet had a dark secret. He had been grooming Jody for months. One day, in February 1984, Doucet took Jody and vanished. He drove over 2,000 miles to a remote location in California, keeping the boy hidden. During this time, he abused Jody both emotionally and physically. Meanwhile, back in Louisiana, Gary and his wife were desperate, fearing the worst. After several days, the police finally tracked Doucet down. He was arrested and Jody was rescued. When authorities contacted the Ploche family, they were relieved that their son was coming home, but for Gary, it was not enough. He had to get revenge. Gary Ploche was not a violent man. He had never broken the law, but after learning what Doucet had done to his son, something inside him changed. Doucet was being extradited back to Louisiana to face trial. Local news stations were covering the story, broadcasting it live at the Baton Rouge airport. That's when Gary saw an opportunity. On March 16, 1984, he went to the airport. He wore a cap, sunglasses, and positioned himself near a row of payphones. He acted casual, blending in with the crowd, but inside, his rage was boiling. At exactly 9:30 p.m., the moment arrived. The cameras were rolling as police escorted Jeff Doucet through the airport. He was in handcuffs, surrounded by officers. No one noticed Gary standing just a few feet away. Then, in the blink of an eye, Gary pulled out a small .38 caliber revolver. As Doucet passed by, Gary turned, aimed his gun, and fired a single shot. The bullet hit Doucet directly in the head, just behind his right ear. He collapsed instantly, blood pooling on the airport floor. He was dead before he hit the ground. The entire event was caught on live television. The cameraman, who was in shock, kept rolling, and the news anchor gasped as viewers across Louisiana watched the execution unfold in real time. Police officers immediately tackled Gary, pinning him to the wall, but he didn't resist. He dropped the gun and calmly said, "If somebody did it to your kid, you'd do it too." In an extraordinary decision, the judge refused to send Gary to prison. Instead of facing a long sentence, he received 5 years of probation, community service, and a suspended prison term. Michael Fossler. On October 8, 2024, a father in Lonoke County, Arkansas, made a decision that would forever alter his life. Aaron Spencer, a 36-year-old combat veteran and father, found himself in a nightmare scenario when he discovered his 14-year-old daughter missing in the early hours of the morning. What followed was a confrontation that ended with the death of 67-year-old Michael Fossler. a man accused of stalking and sexually assaulting Spencer's daughter. Spencer now faces second-degree murder charges, but his actions have drawn widespread support from those who see him as a father who stood up to serve justice when the system failed. The events of that night began when Spencer and his wife Heather were awakened by their daughter's dog barking, an unusual occurrence that prompted them to check on their child. When they realized she was missing, panic set in. Spencer immediately called 911 and began searching for his daughter. Fortunately, Spencer encountered Fossler driving with their daughter in his vehicle. A high-speed chase ensued, ending in a collision. Spencer retrieved his daughter, but during the confrontation, he shot and killed Fossler, later stating that he acted to protect himself and his child. The Spencer's ordeal did not begin that night. Months earlier, Fossler had allegedly groomed and sexually assaulted their daughter, leading to his arrest on charges including rape, internet stalking, and possession of child sexual abuse material. Despite a no-contact order, Fossler was released on a $50,000 bond and was awaiting trial when he reinitiated contact with the teenager. Heather Spencer has since expressed her belief that Fossler intended to harm their daughter. Sheriff John Staley, who has expressed sympathy for Spencer, emphasized that the investigation aims to determine whether the shooting was justified. However, the legal system must now weigh Spencer's actions against the law. While his defense team argues that he acted in self-defense and to protect his child, the prosecution has charged him with second-degree murder, citing the use of a firearm as an aggravating factor. Whatever the outcome, Spencer is happy with his decision to protect his daughter and put the predator away for good.